The next fundamental element that we're going to look at is light. When we talk about photography, light is the most important element to consider. Without light, we simply don't have an image. Capturing good light should be at the forefront of our mind. What is good light can be a little bit subjective and depend on your subject. When it comes to food photography, generally speaking, softer light is better. This is because soft light doesn't have harsh shadows. The features of our subjects are going to be softened, and you'll be able to capture the full spectrum of highlight to shadow in a single image. It's important to know that the direction of light, how hard or how soft your light is, the color temperature of your light, and the intensity of your light all have significant impacts on your images. Being able to understand and use light in all of these different terms is really going to help you level up your photography. Through this section, I'll teach you how to work with light and the best type of light to generally use when it comes to taking pictures of your food. So the first thing to know about working with light is that you generally want to expose for your highlights. When you take photos, you can tell your camera to either expose for the light in your image to be brighter or darker. This can be done on your iPhone by tapping on your screen. A little square is going to appear, which shows you where the iPhone is exposing for and what part of your image it's focusing on. There's a little sun icon that appears to the right of this square. If you drag this sun up or down, you're going to affect your exposure. By dragging it up, you're going to make your image brighter, and by dragging it down, you're going to make your image darker. Generally, when we take digital photos, we want to expose for the highlights in our image, meaning that you should tap the brightest part in your image and drag your sun icon until those bright elements appear exposed and aren't too bright. If you take an image where those highlights are too bright, it can be very hard, if not impossible, to get any lost detail back in that image in editing. When it comes to digital photography, you would much rather have your shadows too dark than your highlights too bright. You can use your editing to bring back a lot more lost shadow detail than you can bring back lost highlight detail. You can also swipe up to reveal some of the more hidden camera tools within your iPhone's camera. You can navigate to the exposure compensation icon, which will allow you to affect the exposure of your image by sliding to the left or right. This can work great with your AEAF lock, which can be enabled by tapping and holding your screen. Once your AEAF lock is enabled, this means that your exposure and focus is locked. And now it's great to use that exposure compensation tool to drag your exposure either down or up depending on what you need in that photo. And then every time you take your photo, it won't auto expose again. It will keep that setting how you had it. As a beginner, you'll probably be working with natural light. Natural light is a great source of light and can offer you a lot of different types of looks depending on the weather or the time of day that you're shooting in. Sometimes it's not always ideal for the subject that you're shooting, so knowing how to problem solve can really help in those types of situations. You first need to make sure that you're getting enough available light. It's a very common mistake to shoot in settings where there's just simply not enough light, and you start to get some noise in your images, or your colors just look dull and nothing really pops or stands out in your image. Finding more available light is going to be a great step to fix this common problem. Window light is a great resource and something that most of us have access to. Or if you don't have access to window light, simply going outdoors is a much better solution than using interior lights. There are a lot of daylight interior lights around now, but generally interior lights are going to be of a warmer color cast, so they're not usually the best choice for taking food photos. As a more general tip, when you're working with light, reducing the amount of sources can really help as a beginner. Lighting becomes a lot more complicated as you add different light sources, especially when you're starting to mix color temperatures that you might get from using natural daylight and using interior lighting. So it's best as a beginner to simply use one source of light. If you're shooting using window light, shut off all of the interior lights and simply use the natural light that's coming in through your window. You're going to see a big difference in your food photography. Lighting can be quite tricky when shooting in a restaurant setting. You won't really have control over the lighting in a restaurant. You kind of just have to take it for what it is. If you're shooting during the day, then you can try to find a spot near a window, which will hopefully give you enough light on your subject. But sometimes this is where those mixing color temperatures can start to clash because they might have interior lights that are competing with the natural daylight coming in through that window. You might be able to block the light that's hitting your subject with maybe a menu or just your body. This is where a lot of that creative problem solving really comes in handy. To preface this slide, this is a little bit of a generalization, but this is the general most effective light for food photography, especially for beginners starting out with this genre. Soft light is going to be your best friend because it's going to make it easier to capture the full range of spectrum between highlight and shadow. You can get soft light coming through a window or on an overcast day where the sun is diffused through clouds. If you're working under harsh daylight, you can use something like a diffuser to soften that light before it hits your subject, which we'll get into a little bit more detailed in the next slide. Or you can do a DIY hack with something like tissue paper, which will diffuse that light, or even something like blinds in front of your window will soften up that light as long as it lets enough light through the blinds onto your subject. That'll work great as well. Direction of light is perhaps one of the more important characteristics of light when it comes to food photography. Flat lighting or front lighting is generally a big no-no when it comes to food photography, since this flattens out all of the features of the subject that you're taking a picture of. When you're taking pictures of food, you generally want to show some depth and some dimension. You can do that by incorporating more shadows into your photos. By lighting your subject from the side or even from behind the subject towards your camera, you can start to introduce shadows and more depth and more dimension to your food. Shooting with a neutral color temp is also ideal for food photography. We start our day with golden hour for the hour after sunrise, and then we get into neutral color temperatures for the rest of the day. And then as we get into an hour before sunset, we have golden hour light again. So operating and using the light that's in between golden hours during the daytime is the best type of light to shoot with for food photography, because that's going to give you a neutral color temperature. Whites are going to appear white in your images, and your colors shouldn't be too skewed by color casts. And then just shooting where there's a lot of available light is very important for food photography. Shooting on a bright day or a day where there's a thin veil of clouds over the sun is great for food photography. Flash should generally be avoided when it comes to taking food photography, because that is going to shoot light at your subject directly from the angle that you're taking a picture of the food from. So you're going to get very flat lighting. And like we mentioned before, flat lighting does your food no favors. If you are stuck in a situation where you don't have enough available light, you can use your night mode feature on your iPhone. When you're in your default camera and you're in a low light situation, your iPhone is going to show a additional icon in the top toolbar next to your flash icon. By tapping this on, you are enabling your night mode and you can take a longer exposure image. In a low light situation, your iPhone is automatically going to add that night mode icon to the bottom toolbar. You can tap that and then you can drag the slider to a certain length. You're telling your iPhone to take a photo for, let's say, 1 second long. You're going to try to hold your iPhone as steady as possible, and it's going to capture an image over that whole second and all of the available light that's there. That should give you a cleaner image where there's less noise in your image and should hopefully allow you to capture better light than what your flash will allow you to capture. An added step when it comes to working with light and can be extremely effective for food photography is using a reflector or a diffuser to shape your natural light. A reflector or diffuser is a photography tool, which is a round disc that has a white, silver, gold, and black side to it. These different sides can be used to bounce light back into your subject. Commonly, you'll use side lighting for a food photo. If the shadows are just a little bit too dark on the one side, you can use something like a reflector to reflect light back onto your subject so the shadows aren't too dark, but you're still getting shadow detail. You don't need fancy photography equipment to do something like this. You can also get white poster board or anything white really to reflect light back onto your subject. You can also do the opposite by using a black material or black object, which will stop the light as soon as it hits that black subject or reflect black back onto your subject and really deepen the shadows of the food that you're taking a picture of. These reflectors also usually have a transparent inside, which when you take the cover off will allow you to diffuse hard light and make it softer when it hits your subject. Let's say that you're working with window light and the sun is coming in harsh on your subject. You can use something like a diffuser in between your subject and the sun in order to soften the light before it hits your subject. A DIY version of this can be anything that's white and transparent, like tissue paper, linen, bed sheets, or a thin curtain. To wrap up this section on light, understand that light is a crucial element when it comes to taking good photos in general, especially so when it comes to taking good food photos. This is an important element whether you're taking photos professionally using a high-end camera or something like a smartphone, iPhone camera. Knowing how to work with light, how to notice good light, and how to manipulate light to fine tune it to your benefit is going to quickly level up the types of photos that you're able to capture. Moving forward, as you take pictures of your food, try to find settings where you have a lot of available light, the light is soft, and you can shoot your subject where the light is hitting it from either a side or backlit position. You'll generally want to work with daylight, and you don't want to have interior lights on while you're using daylight because color temperatures can start to clash. Try to just use that one source, and if you need to add some extra light onto your subject, you can use something like a reflector or something white to bounce light back onto your subject.